I didn't want you to have to make this choice.
30 men.
Plus Krieger.
For the greater good.
Call it what you will.
Let's call it war.
Greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to the 183rd Tractor Beam Busting episode of Mandovision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small independent Star Wars podcast. We are so glad that you're here with us today. Remember, the best way to reach out to us and follow along with us is on social media. We are at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Please email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with all the Mandalorians in your covert. How is everyone doing? Welcome to another happy. That's a weird word to use when talking about this show. Andor Wednesday. But all I know is after an episode, I am extremely happy that I am watching this show and just basking in the glory of what I just witnessed for the last 45 to 50 minutes of TV. My goodness, we are here for the thrilling 11th episode of Season 1. And, you know, I feel like I'm just treading ground I've covered before, but every episode of this show just seems to ratchet things up just another notch in that tension, and it's exquisite. The pain is exquisite. The tension is exquisite, and I'm here for all of it. Just another stellar episode of the show. It just continues to build and elevate, and every week it adds another layer to itself, and it is, in my opinion, and I'm sure everyone's seen similar statements across the internet, across the interwebs, this is like possibly one of the finest Star Wars things I've come across in all forms of media: comic books, movies, video games, novels, all of it. I mean, this is just some really exceptional Star Wars and just great storytelling. Even without the Star Wars. I mean, this is the Star Wars show that you show to people who don't know or want to know anything about Star Wars. And I think this show just sucks you in. You just get... there's so many familiar themes and so many familiar topics. There's so much commentary on things that are going on in actual real-life society, that this is the show that you showed to those non-Star Wars fans. And you're like, just sit down. Have a good time. Stare deeply into Diego Luna's eyes and get lost in the journey of Cassian Andor, because that's what I do every week. And deep, intense eye contact with Diego Luna is the best way to watch the show. And that's what I'm here to say. So let's go ahead and really kind of get into this episode. I mean, I don't even know where do we start with this week's episode of the show. I mean, how do I sort of preface this, right? Let's just go ahead and get the details of the episode out of the way, all right? This is Andor, Episode 11 of Season 1, Daughter of Ferrix. Original air date today, November 16th, 2022. Written by the man himself, the showrunner, Tony Gilroy. Directed by Benjamin Caron. And our plot this week: a fugitive once more, Cassian, must make his next move before it is too late. Our principal cast this week: Diego Luna once again as Cassian Andor, Stellan Skarsgård as Luthen Rael, Who else we got in this one? Genevieve O'Reilly, of course, is Mon Mothma. We got Kyle Solar as Cyril Karn. Forrest Whitaker returns as Saw Gerrera. There's so many people in this cast that are so wonderful. I do a disservice by not reading all their names that appear in the show, but my goodness gracious, what a cast, what a team, what a crazy time to be a Star Wars fan. But, this episode starts, we really pick up where we ended last week's episode with Cassian and Melshi on the run on Narkina 5, hoping to evade being recaptured by the Empire. And that's what we see them doing, evading Imperial patrols who are looking to recapture the fugitives from the prison complex on Narkina 5. And we see them clinging to the side of a rock. The galaxy is a sort of hopeless place, and despite their escape, Melshi's now in a position where Melshi's like, I'm not sure I can go on. Like, I'm clinging to the side of this rock, and my hands don't work, and I got to climb back up the top of this rock to continue my escape to get out of the clutches of the Empire. Maybe it's just easier if I just fall. Like, you sort of wonder, like, what is this? What this guy's thinking? Like, he did this big daring escape, and now is he just gonna fall off the side of this cliff face and plummet to his death, and then in a very vertically challenged situation, you hit that water at that height, that is not going to feel good, I suspect, in a very death-inducing sort of way. But Andor's kind of like, well, I wouldn't say like Andor instills hope in him. He still instills sort of like this calmness to the situation, and sort of just kind of reminds Melshi, like, we got this. We've come this far. Climbing this rock is not going to be the thing that stops us now. And so we know that they're going to be safe. They're going to be back to the top of that rock. Not only that, because we've seen Rogue One, but just again, for those non-Star Wars fans who don't know that Melshi's in Rogue One, maybe you think he is going to die in this. Or maybe you even think Andor's going to die. Maybe you don't realize he's in Rogue One. I don't, that's for each person to decide. But it's just a really kind of interesting way to start the episode off, kind of giving us, like, here's where Andor and Melshi are right now. And then the rest of the episode is all about drawing these threads together, pulling all these strings that we have been unspooling throughout the course of the first season here. And now it's time to pull them all together, and we're gonna tighten up this tapestry that we're weaving, and it's gonna be glorious. And another thing I'm delighted about is, I've speculated on certain things, like, oh, maybe this is the route they go with this. Maybe this is where we're headed with this particular plot element. Thus far, I've been delighted to be wrong. And another reason why I don't generally play the speculation game, but with this show, sometimes they seem to point us in a certain direction, and then they sort of redirect us as the episodes play out, as the show plays out. We start to get to know a little bit more about our characters and their motivations and what's sort of driving them, and again, this show, despite, well, not despite, as the benefit of just having these wonderful performers on the show, each new episode reveals them and something else about them, some other complexity about their character, about their why they choose to do the things that they do. So it starts to Cassian and Melshi cling to the side of this rock, and it's a death on Ferrix, an off-screen death, no less, that draws all of our players back into the orbit of Cassian Andor and the planet Ferrix, where we all started this season. In the first 3 episodes of it, it all points back to Ferrix, into a big confrontation, and now centered around the death of Cassian's adopted mother, Marva, played by the great Fiona Shaw. And so I was sort of 2 minds at first when that scene sort of played out, because I love Fiona Shaw. I think she's a fantastic actor, and I was sad to see her go in such a way. But there is a real underscoring of Cassian's sort of, I don't know if tragedy is the right word, but sort of, there's a real sadness to the Cassian Andor character when you now realize that his adopted mother is not going to be a pawn in some Imperial plot, at least not alive, or in the Rebels plot. Like, they're not going to take Marva hostage and use her against Cassian in that way. No, we're going to add another level of complexity and depth to the Cassian Andor character by adding this real sad element to him. The fact that, like, his actions, his choices, the things that he did that he felt he had to do, that drove him off Ferrix, and kept him from Ferrix. Now kept him from being at his mother's side as she passes on, as she dies, and that's a really sad thing, I think, for a lot of people. I think a lot of us can relate to situations like that. We can't always be there with our loved ones, but we'd like to think that if circumstances were in our favor, we would be. And Cassian's made his choices, and this one is a bad one. This is one he's gonna have to live with forever and ever and ever. That he couldn't be there for Marva when she maybe needed him to be. They sort of hinted at her health going downhill in the last episode, and it's her death that now brings us all back to Ferrix. And let's go ahead and talk about that in more depth and more detail. It's so much to get into. I sort of preambled there a bit longer than I intended to, but you know how that goes on this podcast. All right, so let's do it. Let's do that thing. You know what time it is. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
I need to get a message to Marva Andor.
Cassian?
Don't. No names.
Where are you?
Tell Marva I'm okay. Tell her I'm thinking about her. She'd be proud of me. And I'll get back as soon as I can. Can you remember that?
Cass, hang on.
No names. I'm counting on you, son. Just let her know what I said.
Wait.
What?
Cass, I'm sorry. Your mother's dead.
What's so interesting to me about learning of Marva's death is sort of the way it's told to us, the way we're sort of informed. We're getting it from BT-EMO, depending on how you want to say it, from his perspective, from his optical and auditory inputs. We're learning of what's going on in the Andor house. And don't tell me that droids don't feel things. This is the most distraught I think I've ever seen a droid in Star Wars ever. This droid is insanely upset and emotional over the passing of Marva. Doesn't want to leave the home. Doesn't want to think of life, in regards without Marva in it. And it's so insanely sad. And it sort of sets the tone for things moving forward. Kind of I'm sort of underlining the sadness that's going on Ferrix, and that Andor will feel by the end as he's sort of drawn back into the events of his own life, sort of the mess he has sort of made on Ferrix with everything that he sort of set off in those first couple of episodes. But it is Marva's death that brings a lot of our principal players to the front here at the very beginning of the episode, because ISB supervisor Dedra Meero wants to allow the public funeral to happen to bait the trap for Andor. And initially, as Dedra's talking to the officer on Ferrix, they're going to deny the permit. They don't allow these sort of cultural expressions any longer. But Dedra knows this is a prime opportunity to draw Cassian Andor out of wherever he's hiding for this funeral. So they want it to be public. They want to control the environment. They want to set the situation, and again, sort of bait that trap for Andor to fall in, so they can capture him, and through him learn or confirm who it is that is the person they call Axis, the one sort of putting together this network of rebel cells across the galaxy. What we also learned that I thought was very, very interesting was this term that we get that Marva was being bricked, and that was basically she's being cremated and packed into a brick to build on Ferrix. She is the daughter of Ferrix. She is the titular daughter of Ferrix for this episode, and the other daughters of Ferrix are the ones who inter her and take her body away for this bricking process, and it really lends more depth to that sort of cultural exploration that the show has so far done pretty darn well, whether it's here on Ferrix or when we talked about the natives of Aldhani. We even get a little bit about the people, the Narkinians. We hear a little bit more about their people in this episode too. So I sort of like that we're getting more into some of these cultural things. And, we saw a good expression of Ferrix culture in those first 3 episodes, but this is a very fascinating level for the way they incorporate their dead into their everyday lives and build Ferrix on top of its important citizens, I suppose, or as primary citizens, or even just all, maybe all citizens have the option of being bricked and used as a foundation for Ferrix to build and grow, because this is a very independent culture. The Empire is now there suppressing tons and tons and tons of aspects of it. And I was thinking back to when I was first reviewing the show, and we were spending more time on Ferrix, and I often described Ferrix as sort of having like this very tactile feel to it, like you could touch it and it had like this texture, and this just adds to that, I think. And I thought it was a very fascinating idea, because often when we explore death in Star Wars, it's sort of familiar, right? It's funeral pyres and things like that, and like Padme's death, sort of like the funeral march and pallbearers and those sort of very familiar images that we kind of know and love, and not love, but that we are very familiar with from our cultures here on planet Earth. The idea of being bricked is fascinating to me. I don't know. I find it intriguing. Perhaps if I lived in a place like Ferrix, I would like to be bricked as well and be part of something that future generations can build upon. It's a very interesting idea. I liked it very, very much. Also on Ferrix, we noticed the Imperial spy Corv. He's still hanging around watching the Andor residence, waiting for signs of Cassian to return. Also in the same hangout, the same, like a coffee shop across the street, we see Rebel spy Cinta now working as basically the Ferrix barista, I suppose, watching the Andor residence. So these two agents from the other side of the street from each other, we got the Imperial and the Rebel, both were in the same building for most of their scenes, at least in this episode, and I think the little bit that we saw them last week, even in the same area, watching the Andor residence. You'd have to think they'd be aware of each other, or at the very least, you'd think Cinta is, because Cinta seems to have more of a sense of Imperial badness when she is paying attention to it. I don't know if he, again, sort of like that, if that Imperial arrogance is affecting him, so he's not thinking so much of her as a dissident. But it'll be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out, if they are sort of aware of each other as watchers of the Andor residence or not. But it's from this observation that Cinta will make contact with Vel and relay the information about Marva Andor's passing. And Vel decides to break all protocols because signals aren't being answered and responded to in any fashion. So Vel breaks protocol, goes to see Clea. I hope I'm saying that name right. I feel like I say it differently every time we go on the show. Clea, Sela. I can't. But Clea is very upset that Vel is there, breaking protocol, speaking in a very uncoded, unguarded way. And I don't know, Vel just has no time for it. It's very interesting, Vel's sort of reaction to things since the Aldhani heist, right? She's not been able to have any direct contact with Luthen. She's been going through Clea, and I think that really rankles her. So she's trying to get this urgent message about Cassian coming out of hiding wherever he is for this funeral, very possibly, so Luthen can spring into action and do what he's supposed to do. Or I could just have Cinta do it. Would also be my thought on the matter too. But it seems like the whole plan is everyone's heading towards Ferrix. So whether that means Luthen's going to be boots on the ground because Luthen is now insanely concerned about potential exposure if Cassian were to be caught by the Imperials, maybe he doesn't quite trust Cinta to do the job, even though Cinta does seem like she would happily kill Cassian Andor. But again, we're drawing all these characters together too, because you'd also have to think that Vel will be drawn back to Ferrix as well. So we get all of our principles back in the same thing. And the word of Marva's death reaches back to Morlana 1, where we hear from Sergeant Kostak, who we haven't seen since the third episode, who reaches out to Cyril Karn to let him know this news. Like, hey, Andor's mom is dead, and we might be able to smoke him out. We might be able to, get back in the good graces of our superiors. And the ever ambitious Cyril Karn sees this as an opportunity, right? Again, to redeem himself, to get back in his good graces, and probably get a little bit of his pound of flesh out of Cassian Andor. And he has no problem stealing credits from his mother's safe to fund his quest for redemption. So all these things kind of coming together, drawing all of our characters back to Ferrix, putting us back in the orbit of the planet, the people, that kicked the whole season off. We go back to Ferrix now. We got to gallivant across the galaxy, but we all come back for this. This is the moment that brings all of our characters together. The death of Marva to, again, bait a trap for Cassian Andor. And it's not just an Imperial trap. The rebels want to find him. You know, Luthen has something at stake here. And again, from Cassian's perspective too, I think he has to assume now, or I think he has to feel that he has let Marva down in some way because he wasn't there for her. So that's probably a good amount of guilt to carry around. That will definitely drive him back to the planet for the funeral to see her maybe one last time as a brick in a wall. I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to sing the song. You can't make me do it. We also cut to Bix, still a captive of the Empire, still being interrogated, looking worn down and haggard from this experience, from having Dr. Gorst playing those sounds of death cries of that alien species, whose name I did not write down for today's episode. It seems to have broken her in many, many ways. And so they are interrogating her, and they show her a holo picture of Anto Krieger. And they want to know, is this who you introduced Cassian Andor to? You know, they're trying to determine, is Anto Krieger, is he Axis? And we never get to hear her answer. She's, again, sort of out of sorts. We don't know what her mental state is at the moment. Physically, she's not, looking at the best she could. But I would imagine being detained by the Empire, they're not giving you showers and soap and fresh towels. You don't get to clean up after these sessions. No. So that's a lot of stuff right there at the beginning of our show, of our episode for the show for Andor, to kind of just set the stage for what's coming in our finale. And then we kind of get to our bigger players in the rest of the episode as it sort of doles itself out. And it's just a really, again, I'm just going to say it, it's an intense episode. It's setting the stage, but it's building the action, it's building the tension in such a way that you're just captivated by it. You can't take your eyes off the screen. You want to know what's coming next. And you may notice that I kind of went through a lot of that stuff pretty quickly here without incorporating a lot of the audio clips from the show. And I this week, I don't think that's going to be necessary, because as great as the dialogue is in this episode, so much of the performances in this episode comes from like non-verbal communication, right? It's seeing the reactions of people. It's processing their body language. It is the emotional turmoil that they're all going through with the various things that are happening to each of their characters and based on the situation that they're in. I played that clip leading into this portion of the show where Andor gets the news that is of Marva's passing. And I cut it off right after the line is delivered, because the rest of that scene, well, there's no talking, but if you want to see Diego Luna acting his body off, watch that scene. Watch his eyes, his shoulders, his body language, the way everything is on him, and the way he sort of keeps it to himself, the way he sort of transforms and sort of tucks it inside of his body when he goes back to talk to Melshi about what they're to do next. There's a lot of that in this episode from all of our wonderful cast. Just a lot of great nonverbal communication happening on the screen with the way they're reacting to things, the way they're processing information, and it's a tour de force. The performances in the show have been stellar. Even the small performances here and there, just watching the way they body the body language of all the performances, it says so much that really just adds so many layers to the show, to the script, right? Like Tony Gilroy has written a great script for this episode, but the actors bring so much nuance and substance to it that they bring it alive in a very fascinating way. So you're not going to hear a ton of clips on today's Mandovision podcast from the show, mostly because I don't want to undercut those incredible emotional performances that are in this episode. So by all means, watch this episode more than once or twice. Watch it 18 times. That's going to be what I plan on doing. So just copy me. All right, let's turn our attention to our favorite rebel sympathizer and secret supporter in the Senate. I am, of course, talking about Mon Mothma's arc. In this season, I've been completely fascinated by it since the early episodes, and today takes it to a whole different place. The last few episodes have sort of hinted at the old Chandrillan customs, the old Chandrillan ways of doing things, the arranged marriages, not for love, but for business purposes, almost like business transactions in a sense, and how Mon has not been a supporter of it, even though she was in one of these relationships. Her marriage to Perrin is the prime example, and we've seen how passive aggressive that entire relationship is. This week on the episode, Vel comes back over, who we learned last week is Mon's cousin, and what we're seeing is Mon drinking a drink. I'm assuming an alcoholic one because she can't be delighted with what she's seen. But it's her daughter Lyda, in a very traditional Chandrillan custom that Mon was hoping would go away, that Vel was hoping would go away, and it's sort of I don't really know how to describe it because it's not something that I can quite put words to because it's just something so unfamiliar to me. But basically, like embracing these old ways that Mon has been trying to get herself and her family and Chandrilla society away from, and she finds her daughter embracing it, right? Like this sort of I don't even know, just these ancient traditions, this way of the braid, and all the customary stuff that goes along with that, like arranged marriages. And as we know, Mon's in a situation now where an arranged marriage to the son of Davos Skulldun would solve her problems, right? That would take care of the missing, 500,000 credits that are unaccounted for in her accounts that are missing, that she had been directing in different ways to support Luthen's cause, to build this rebel network. And I like how Mon sits down with Vel and kind of goes over all of it and kind of lays it all out there for us, like how easy it was at the beginning just to move this money around. There wasn't any oversight. She could just do it herself and start these other accounts and just let the money kind of flow downhill. And then Imperial oversight becomes an issue, and she has to pull. I think she even describes it as pulling it back uphill. But there's a ledger missing funds now, and she has to bring in Take Holma. But he warns her that there's even more danger going on because she's not been as smart as she thought with these things. Like there's fingerprints and data trails everywhere that she's been doing these things. So Tay's trying to cover all these things up, but that money's still missing, and now she's in a predicament because when these auditors come from the Empire, they will know, and all will be lost, right? So she finds herself in this situation with a way out, and just like Cassian's underlying sadness that we talked about, especially by the end of this episode, when he realizes that his actions have cost him his final moments with his mother, Mon Mothma's in a situation where, again, as when you look back at the season as a whole and sort of the way she's talked very negatively about Chandrillan customs and traditions and the arranged marriages, and she gets very much into that with Davos Golden in last week's episode as well. She's now in a position where she will have to potentially embrace this to get out of trouble. But what's more sad about this, what's more upsetting about this to Mon Mothma and to us as viewers, is that her daughter's going to be okay with it because she's doing these things. So Mon is potentially damning her daughter to a fate that she never wanted her to have, but her daughter's okay with it because her daughter thinks these are great things and has bought into these things, a penny for, in for a penny, in for a pound. And it I think it makes us sad as viewers to know that Mon's now in this situation that the exit is right there. Her daughter's into these things, and the proposal with Skulldun's son is right there, and all these things go away. But she knows what she's condemning her daughter to, and that is so sad. That is so unbelievably sad to think about. And again, we played the clip. Saw Gerrera talks about the greater good. And in a sense, these are things for the greater good. You're thinking about the galaxy as a whole. You're thinking about the needs of the many, not the needs of the one or the few, right? Or the few or the one, as Spock would say. But that's a different star. That's a different star. We don't talk about that one on the show. So it's just sad. Like this. Like, what is the cost of fighting tyranny. What is the cost of fighting for freedom and ending oppression? And it's just a lot. It's so much to think about. It's just so insanely sad. This episode made me so sad in so many ways for our characters. Oh boy, oh boy, the Mon Mothma story has really hit me a lot harder than I expected it to. When when we were watching the trailers and when we were kind of getting an idea of what the story was going to be for the show, I did not think this would be the trajectory for Mon Mothma's arc. And don't get me wrong, I am gobbling it up. I'm loving it. It's delightfully delicious and just but there's just such sadness to it. And ooh, I mean, how can you not feel for her in this situation? She's trying to like restore freedom. Oh, I've already said it. I don't want to repeat myself anymore, but it's just so gosh darn sad. Holy Toledo. And she's having this conversation with Vel, another person who completely sympathizes with her. And what's even more interesting too is like, Perrin's not in the episode, but Perrin, Mon relays information that Perrin is surprisingly not crazy about Lyta doing this either. This is all something that Lyta has chosen to do on her own. She wasn't influenced or coerced by her father, because one of our impressions was that Lyta was very much her father's daughter. But that's not the case. This is something she did on her own. She found the Elder. She brought the Elder in, brought her friends in. This is This is something that this generation of Chandrillans wants to embrace, despite the fact that previous generations have been trying so hard to get away from it. And there is precedent of that in our society, but it's not something I feel comfortable talking about because it's not something I am super well versed in. In my mind, the closest thing I can relate it to is like when you read history of like the early of early colonization in America with the Puritans, right? Puritanical lifestyle versus other lifestyles of the time. That's the closest thing I could think of. I'm sure there are more modern interpretations that we can draw from, but again, that's not my wheelhouse. But still, so sad, so very very sad. And now we'll talk about Luthen Rael, who has another incredible performance in this episode. Stellan Skarsgård is just crushing the show when he shows up. He shows up and brings such gravitas to his scenes. And I've been just delighted when he's been in the same shots, in the same scenes with Forrest Whitaker or Saw Gerrera, because they have something kind of dynamic happening with the two of them that is just juicy. And I want more of it. I'm here for all the Luthen Rael and Saw Gerrera scenes I can get my hands on. And this is another good one too. And we're seeing Saw, we're seeing that hyper paranoid Saw Gerrera that we got to know in Rogue One. We're seeing that's been an early thing of his. He's got to be worried about spies and people embedding themselves into his organization, into his group, into his cell, and potentially putting his people in danger and harm and killing him and ending the fight, right? That's what Saw Gerrera is all about. He's all about the fight. And Saw is initially upset because Saw wants in now. He's decided, he's changed his mind. He's reversed course. He wants in on Anto Krieger's attack on Spellhouse. And Luthen is in the position where he has to sort of dissuade him from that. He doesn't want to tell him why initially. He's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. We should back off. Yeah, your people could do your own thing. I'll let Krieger do his. And Saw's not a dumb man. Saw's lived this long. He's fought this hard for this long by being smart, by paying attention, by picking up on the subtle clues and cues of the people around him. And it's one of these subtle cues that Saw figures out that Luthen is going to sacrifice Krieger's men to keep a contact alive, to keep an Imperial spy of his, someone in his network, in place. He's going to sacrifice 31 men. And at first Saw is upset about that. Saw seems like he threatens to, what if I tell Krieger? What if I could ratchet out right now? And Luthen's like, you could, but like, I'll sacrifice Krieger because Krieger doesn't know me. If Krieger's captured and interrogated, he can't point anyone at the Empire back. Saw Gerrera is the bigger danger. That's part of the reason why he doesn't want to burn Saw. But at the same time, he knows Saw's still going to be a resource. And Saw and Luthen is a very different dynamic than Saw, and then oh my goodness, the dynamic between Saw and Luthen is very different than the relationship that Luthen has with Krieger. Again, where Krieger doesn't even know who that Luthen is. So it's not until it's not until Luthen points to Tubes and says, "Oh, Tubes is my spy," and it's a whole thing. And Saw sort of has to realize that his paranoia is getting a touch out of hand, and he needs to calm down a little bit and listen to Luthen, and realize that this is a sacrifice that has to be made to keep the work going, to keep the battle going, to keep the fight going. And again, it's just a really great scene between these two powerhouse actors, and it underscores the necessity of sacrifice in the early Rebel Alliance, right? Like you can't get to the Rebels of Yavin without the actions of Luthen Rael and Saw Gerrera at this point. They're doing the dirty work right now for all the glory that will come to the Rebel Alliance one day, But there's a lot of just muck they have to wallow around in to get this fight off the ground. And as Luthen has pointed out to us, it's not until the Empire puts a real stranglehold on people that they will rise up to fight. And that's what Luthen has to kind of keep pushing towards. He has to keep making the Empire react in negative ways to crushing the people, right? As he tells Cassian in episode 3, people don't even realize that they're being choked out by the Empire right now. That's how subtle it's been. Now he's making the Empire more overt, more obvious, and that has to keep moving forward. And he needs to keep his contact in place. We met him last week. We know who it is. That was a relationship that was cultivated and developed and grown, and Luthen is not willing to sacrifice his ISB mole at this point. And I think those of us who watch a lot of spycraft movies know exactly what's going on here. But to see it transposed into Star Wars, it's just so delightful. It is just so awesome. I loved it so much. It's just great to see these elements put into play in Star Wars. It takes a little bit of the shine off the Rebel Alliance, which I think is fair. I think that's what you have to do to kind of get a little grit into the Star Wars galaxy. I'm here for all of that. I am A-okay with it. And again, you can have that noble, shiny version of Star Wars too. Like, there's Star Wars for everyone. There's no wrong way to Star Wars necessarily. Star Wars is a buffet. It is a smorgasbord. You pick up the parts you want, you pass on the ones you don't. But I'm here for the grit. Put the grit right in my eggs. I'm here for it. And then as he's leaving, we get to see the Fondor in a way that we haven't seen the Fondor. I am, of course, referring to Luthen Rael's ship. It's not merely some transport. Oh, no, my friends. This is a ship in the Star Wars galaxy. It has to be functioning on a different level. And we get to see it today as an Imperial patrol who's been monitoring for partisan activity in the sector, intercepts Rael above the planet, and intends to board him and lock tractor beams on him. And Luthen's got his rad nav droid who is just, that's an awesome droid. The droid who's controlling the Fondor is awesome. I can't remember. I think they even had a name for him in the first episode or two, but now I don't remember what it is. I have to look that up again. But is he BXE maybe? That's what's sticking around in my head, but that could be wrong. But again, a great nav droid who pulls up all kinds of stuff. That ship controlling the Fondor is awesome, or the droid controlling the Fondor is awesome. Luthen has a transponder code generator. He has an Alderaanian traitor alliance code. The Empire doesn't care. They're going to board him anyways under the guise of practice. And Luthen Rael can't stand that. And so they lock him in the tractor beam. And we get to see that the Fondor has countermeasures for tractor beams, which, that tickled me to no end, because that is something I have speculated about endlessly in my free time. And to see it deployed in a way in that fashion was a absolute delight. To see him break that tractor beam, shred it with those projectiles that he launched that were now caught in the tractor beam, being pulled rapidly towards the ship, shredding that dish, the tractor dish. Awesome, so great. And then when the Empire launches their TIE wing to detain him, we get to see the firepower of the Fondor as well. They blow up a TIE bomber, they blow up a TIE fighter, and then Luthen deploys, I don't know exactly what they are, just some kind of crazy lightsaber-esque cutting beams from the side of the ship, does a quick spin move, and shreds 2 TIEs and before launching to lightspeed, while a hapless crew of that TIE of the Imperial patrol ship just watches, mouths agape. And I love this. I love the scene as Luthen is fighting against the tractor beam, and the Empire's like, "What is he doing? He can't get away from us." Again, that Imperial arrogance just coming out so strongly in the show. It's just absolutely delightful, the absolute confidence that Luthen has, the way he acts, the way that he's planned for all these things. If you're not dying to know more about Luthen Rael's backstory, I don't know what you're paying attention to. I don't know, but I'm completely fascinated by this man. I really, really am. I guess we'll get to our main character. All right, let's talk about Cassian, and he's with Melshi for this episode. After we see them on the cliffs on Narkina 5, avoiding being recaptured by the Empire, they get captured themselves by some native Narkinians after a lackluster effort to steal their quad jumper, and they get caught up in like these really gross-looking webby things that the Narkinians had, and that just looked like slimy and awful, and I did not care for it. But the Narkinians, once they realized they were prisoners from the facility and not the Empire themselves, seemed much more okay with them. Apparently, the Narkinians not keen on the Empire being there, ruining the water, ruining the catches of the natives, whatever it is. I'm assuming some sort of native fish that they like to catch. The catches have not been as good with the Imperial presence there, sullying the waters around the planet. So they decide to aid Cassian and Melshi and help them get off planet away from the Empire, because they got no love for the Empire. So where do they want to go? Cassian has one place in mind, of course. It's time to return to Nemos, where the housekeeping isn't good. And Andor's guns, credits, and of course Nemik's manifesto are still hidden above the shower. I guess that's a pretty good hiding spot. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I guess unless something happened with like that hydro shower, right? Like something would what do they call the shower in Star Wars? I can't remember. It was not a hydro shower. That's not it. I'm drawing a blank on it. But as soon as I turn the recorder off, I will remember what they call a shower in Star Wars. And maybe somebody will let me know on Twitter too. Gosh, why can't I think of it? It's in my brain rattling around somewhere. But oh well. So I guess it's a decent enough hiding place, because unless something breaks with the shower, right, it's just whatever. So he recovers all this stuff, and that's when he makes the call to Ferrix, and Zanwan answers the call and breaks the news to Andor about Marva. And again, we sort of, just to kind of remind you all, we talked about it a little bit. This just sort of underscores, Andor's kind of selfish acts, what those acts have cost him now, right? As he was driven off of Ferrix, he couldn't go back to Ferrix. When he went back, they told him he had to go because things are terrible here because of what you've done. And you brought a garrison to Ferrix by getting into it with what you did on Morlana 1, right? Like, you brought all this trouble down on Ferrix, and now you can't stay. And then he goes and does the Aldhani heist, gets arrested, and all these things have happened, and he can't be there for his mother, the woman who adopted him and rescued him from Kenari. And again, it's just another level. It adds this sadness to the character, right? This burden of guilt that his actions, like these, pretty, we'll call them selfish actions, right? They're motivated by his own personal interests and not the greater good of anything. Now cost him these final moments with Marva. And I think that's going to be a guilt that he carries around for a long, long time. And depending on how things shake out in episode 12 next week, I would imagine that Nemik's manifesto will come into play. The inspiration that Marva took from the Aldhani heist, I think Cassian will have to reevaluate his actions in the context of the galaxy at large, and where is he going to fit in with that? And then of course he's going to have to survive the Empire's trap, the Rebels' trap for him, and a vengeful Cyril Karn coming gunning for him as well, who's got his own vendetta. So Karn never teams up with the ISB like we thought they would, like we thought he may. So it's actually three parties that are insanely interested in Cassian Andor. Not to mention maybe there's some people on Ferrix who maybe have him out for it too, but we'll see about that. I don't think so. I think it's just those three that we discussed. But yeah, holy smokes, did we set the table up here for just a really, really what I can only imagine is going to be just a pulse-pounding, tension-filled episode to close out season 1 of what has been the best Star Wars show, in my humble opinion. And I say that as a man who dearly loves The Mandalorian and Boba Fett. But this show, it's like I said, I told you before, it's just scratching an itch that was between the center of my shoulder blades that I didn't know was there, but it feels so good to get it scratched right now. Holy Toledo. Give me some more of that back-scratching joy. Because, oof, I needed it, and I didn't know how much I needed it until I got it. And it's been a delight. So, yeah, the stage is set for next week's pulse-pounding season finale for Andor, right before we all get drunk on gravy and turkey meats. Can't wait. It's going to be, what a way to kick off a holiday weekend. Andor. Just going to watch it on loop all Thanksgiving dinner. We'll talk about that next week, though, all right? I don't know what else to have to say about this episode, though, other than I guess I wouldn't imagine we'll spend too much time getting into Luthen's origins necessarily. He may drop some hints next week. Maybe we'll find out a little bit, but I want to know this dude's backstory. Who is this guy? Was he like Republic intelligence at some point? Like he's so insanely cunning and crafty. Like he has to have some sort of a spy background, right? Like he is Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. This guy is so insanely capable. I want to know more. I want to know where he came from. I want to know what happened. I want to know all of it. But I may have to wait for season 2 for that. And then the one thing I've speculated on that I'd still really like to know, and I don't know if it'll. I don't know if they'll do it or not at this point, because I wonder if if it might just be a comment on the bureaucracy of the Empire. But will Dedra Meero and the ISB ever figure out that they had Cassian Andor in custody already and he got away? Because that will, again, maybe that's just for my own amusement, but if they don't talk about it, maybe that just might be a commentary on the insane bureaucracy of the Empire and how it's too big for its own good because it doesn't even know what the left hand doesn't know what the right is doing kind of situation. So yeah, I'm curious to see if those two things get addressed and shaken out. Will we find it? What's going to happen to B2 Emo? Will Cassian come and take him home and they go on adventures together in season 2 before K2SO shows up? I guess we'll have to wait and find out. Or is that little droid going to? Oh, is he just going to miss Marva too much? And I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about droid death. It's making me sad. All right, I think we're going to close up shop here. What a great show. My goodness gracious. I don't know what else to say. This has just been a delight. And every Wednesday has been so much fun to watch. So I hope you all feel the same way and are as excited as I am about this show. Another reminder that we are on social media, so please follow us at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Still on Twitter. I don't know if we will stay there. That's up for debate, I suppose. But we're there for now. So reach out to us there and on Instagram. Please email us at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. If you'd like to support the show by giving us some sweet 5-star reviews, we would be insanely appreciative of that because they really do help small independent shows like us stand out, not get lost in the shuffle, and we need all the help to fight against that shuffle. The truffle shuffle indeed. If you want to support the show with a couple bucks here and there, you can do that over at patreon.com/Mandovision. You can become a Mandovision maniac and join Buckethead Nation and hang out with people like the Aspinhill Chody, the Batman Abejo, Jeff Nail. Just got a great podcast. Check it out. Called The Ringing Ear. Thanks to Evil Circle, the evilest of all circles, the Squidmaster General Brian Broussard, the New Jersey Devil Mark Wegemer, the Beer Hop Brigadier General Jesus Beer Hop, the Silent Assassin, he who shall not be named, and Syndicate Ram, co-host of Come On, It's Still Good. A great movie podcast and a occasional collaborator here on the Mandovision podcast. So check out their show. It's a good time. All right. We'll be back next week, like I said before, for that pulse-pounding finale of Andor. Get ready. It's going to be a good one. Just buckets on all week. It's holiday season. Keep your bucket on just for safety. You know, when you're going out to the store, to the market, just have your bucket on. There's crazy people out there tossing turkeys at people. You never know. The bucket could save your life. All right. Remember, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
I find that answer vague and unconvincing.